So I promised the Faith a while back, but I got to realizing the premise of the Faith is very similar to another Gumball episode, the Pizza, and well, a Versus was born. Also plug in my Discord.
And in other news, scientists have discovered a completely new color, a mixture of blue and red called Bled, and here it is on TV for the first time.
Yeah, typical. Stuff always breaks just when the warranty runs out.
Starting with the Faith, this is an Alan-centered episode, the 6th one, after the Photo, the Storm, the Saint, the Traitor, and the Vision. It starts off with many of the characters losing color. They layer in a lot of jokes that make sense given their current circumstances, from seeing a new color to eating kitty litter that looked like a cereal box. It's a very weird occurrence. As the town slowly starts to deteriorate in color, these entire first scenes are building up that a few instances are happening within Elmore, like the cleaning of graffiti, recycling, or attending nursing homes that were done exclusively by one boy. And since then, the entire town has been slowly descending into chaos. What I like about this episode is that unlike a few of the others, this episode establishes a lot of legitimacy and credibility towards Alan's nice actions. While he was established to be nice in other episodes, and in fact in The Saint, challenged on his niceness, this actually does a better job because his niceness was depended on by the citizens of Elmore.
Oh no, I stole the last meatball. It tastes so good because it's the only one left. The secret ingredient is your despair.
It was just a nice and heartwarming implication, despite being incredibly short-sighted and vulnerable to situations like this. In fact, it's like when we learned that Crocker was a source of fairy magic in the Fairly OddParents. It makes sense in a way, but it leaves you open to major outages, like what happened in that episode when he was revealed. Some of these scenes are really well done, like the graffiti scene. On first look, I didn't think there was a pole there, but if you look closely, the pole is carefully textured to give the illusion of not being there, and only being exposed due to its drop shadow. And that attention to detail is praise, at least to me. You also have the scene in which one of the cops, since they're corn and the environment is so hot, pops in front of their eyes. It's such an intense scene. It's almost misplaced with the nonchalant way Gumball and Darwin react to their world losing order in front of their eyes. I love the voice direction of Jeff, this corn dude here. It really sold the scene as important. But anyway, before we get to the source of this, let's talk about the pizza. So why is the pizza similar to the Faith? We'll get to that in just a moment, but allow me to set the scene. The entire Watterson family storms into the living room to rant about their day. No, this isn't the worst, another episode where they rant and figure out who had the worst day. They argue about who's going to make dinner, and even that is funny.
Gumball, it's your turn to make dinner.
Why?
Because I'm too angry to think about that an excuse.
Darwin, make dinner. Why me? And I eat.
Anais is having none of that weak sauce, Darwin. I love how the opening scene sets the tone for the family to be ultra unempathetic, to serve as a lesson as to what they would eventually do to Larry, as that is the crux of this episode. As you may or may not know, Larry is a rock who works nearly every job in Elmore. He's a cashier in one episode and a delivery man in the next episode. So of course, because he's doing nearly every job in Elmore, he gets taken advantage of hard. There's been episodes dating back to The Laziest, where Gumball and Darwin in a SpongeBob and Patrick sort of style basically ruin Larry's life to turn him lazy in order to compete with their dad. Besides the horrible implications I just placed there, Larry is pretty much put at the butt of many jokes, unless it's around Richard, to which they are neck and neck, and are shown to be great rivals in a sense.
A family-sized pizza with 1/5 margarita, 1/5 vegetarian, 1/5 surf, 1/5 turf, and 1/5 mega meat. None of the fifths can be cooked in the same oven, but must be an identical temperature on delivery.
And a toy.
As you can see, they're horrible to Larry, demanding a ridiculous amount of work for very little payoff, and that leads into Larry contemplating, is everything he's doing worth it?
If I run the red lights, I can be there in 15 minutes.
That is acceptable.
That will be $9.99. And would you like to add a tip?
I don't know. Does it taste good?
No, sir. I mean, do you want to pay a gratuity for service and in compensation for the half-hour-long order you just made?
Do I have a choice?
Always, sir.
Great, then no.
Also, this is one of those Gumball episodes that stays in one spot. Like with the transformations, it's kind of all happening in one spot. While logically it makes sense for the story, I did get kind of tired seeing the same backdrop for a large chunk of the episode. They try to break it up with subtle hinting of chaos outside when you see things like the progression of a cop car to a burning cop car, but it doesn't help that much. What is important to note here is that all the characters are very mad, and they don't care too much about how they come off, and that's a great perspective to have, at least when you set up one of these stories in an episode. However, let's get back to the Faith. Getting back to the Faith, the episode leads us into a pretty much monochromatic environment. I love how it gives a little bit of tension with its camera angles. Going from your regular shots to more adventurous angles really help with the cinematography. One Jurassic Park reference down, and Gumball and Darwin get kidnapped by the Boy Scouts. Because as you see, Alan was also in charge of taking care of the Boy Scouts. It really makes you think about, when did he have time to go to school? There's just something about a bunch of rogue kids with protractors and colored pencils tied to sticks, hunting any trespassers to join their crew. It just fits the Gumball charm. I do have to say, however, The Faith is not a quote funny episode. There is a really funny joke of Rocky trying to find a woman in gray whom he met on a dating app, but this episode's comedy levels is pretty low, and that's okay. While funny equals money, and Gumball is known for being funny, the way they set up the story leads us more into mystery than comedy. And I'd rather they have a little less than to overshoot their target with comedy and ruin their immersion of mystery, and the point of waiting to see Gumball figure out who's causing all of this mess.
We have all the badges now.
Wait, aren't you supposed to earn them by actually learning the skills?
Like, technically, yeah.
So did you technically learn how to tie knots? Meh, shame they didn't earn their self-defense badges either.
Was that a baseball bat? Okay. They finally reach the summit, which with a really nice touch, shows us the incredible sadness that Alan can reach, which is the opposite of the extreme happiness that he's known for. In a sense, it really makes his character much more powerful than his figure would lead you to believe. In fact, his intense negative energy is so powerful that it leads to Gumball being severely pessimistic and sad to a cartoonish degree, because of the sheer amount of sadness that Alan radiates. Does that mean that Alan is the sole provider of Elmore's happy-go-lucky cheery nature? I guess, when you peel back Gumball as a show, because we know that while it looks happy and colorful, it's filled with a lot of selfish, rude, and pessimistic folk. So to have Alan be so positive that it negates everyone else is actually really impressive. I also just love this shot of a legless balloon on a swing that he can't control. We'll get to why Alan has lost faith once we catch up with the pizza. So if you remember earlier, I brought up the question, how are these episodes similar? Well, they both feature the aspect of a character being the sole source of something, whereas Alan is the sole source of optimism and happiness and volunteering in Elmore. Larry is the go-to guy with many jobs, and thus when he's no longer working, it leads into a catastrophic result. However, just like with the Faith, the same logic applies here. To have one person being the main source of something to that degree is pretty dumb, but in a good way when it comes to Elmore. They then begin to tell why they're mad, starting with Nicole.
Before I do what I'm about to do, I want you to know this is not your fault. You're just doing your job, but someone has to suffer for what happened, and unfortunately, you're the only one around.
You're a worm! You're a thieving, bottom-feeding, money-grabbing crook! People like you are squeezing the very last cent out of hard-working families! You're the reason ice caps are melting and baby polar bears are homeless!
As you see here, Larry, being the messenger, takes a large amount of verbal punishment despite only doing his job. I'm sure if he could, he would do it for a much lower price, but that's his job. He doesn't determine the price. This episode does a very good job at portraying customers taking advantage of staff and employees, who are only following the orders they were given by their boss, or in this case, Larry's boss. The same happens with Richard, albeit in a more disgusting way, and also with Gumball, Darwin, and Anais together. The most important thing to note, though, is that with each flashback...
Would you like to add a tip?
Sure, a little extra 12%.
You're a worthless maggot! A pointless little...
Would you like to add a tip? Well, how about a tip?
Oh, sure, thank you. Hey, look at 20.
Get out of here!
He always asks for a tip. Like with Richard and the phone call, they all rudely in their own way not only deny a tip, but degrade Larry. Now yes, this does make the family look very much in the wrong and very rude. However, this is one aspect of Gumball that I enjoy. They aren't picture perfect, and like anyone, they often overlook times where they could have handled a situation a little more tactful. What I think this episode does better than The Faith is that we actually get to see Larry broke. In The Faith, you do not see why Alan was sad in the first place. They're also in the living room / dining room area 1 second, and in the next scene, Gumball and Darwin are out of the house investigating. This would be a simple fix too. Just on the way, have them reminisce about a negative scene with Alan. Something like, hey, what happened here? Oh, that reminds me of something that happened with Alan earlier today. And you can show a scene having Gumball being fully in the wrong. A little thing like that would make sense for the story, as The Faith isn't heavily dependent on this mystery element. But speaking of, let's finish off The Faith. Ending off with The Faith, we learn a little bit more about Alan.
No matter how much I try, the world will never be perfect.
Well, we gotta get back on the horse.
Oh, why bother?
Because we need people like you to do all that work, so that people like me don't have to.
His former never-ending quest was to make the world perfect. However, we finally get to sit down and talk about his dynamic with Gumball. There are quite the amount of episodes where Gumball blatantly steps over Alan and completely takes advantage of his tolerance and kindness. Even here, he does the bare minimum to show his appreciation, often having to be pushed into showing any form of niceness. And I really do enjoy scenes like this because they don't come up much. If they did, then Gumball wouldn't be a comedy show. It'd be a more story-driven show, which Gumball should stay away from. To have characters sit down and actually acknowledge how they feel is a tactic that Gumball uses precisely for good effect. Yes, Gumball and Alan would still have a lot of compatibility issues, but what makes this work is it's slightly less than other episodes. They like each other more here than in The Saint, where Gumball went nuts around Alan. They have a song explaining that, well, life sucks a large chunk of the time. There's times where you question how bright the future is, and if it's worth it. And you start to question if Alan would even find the strength to have optimism after this song. It is also in these close-up shots when you can really appreciate the level of detail done on Alan. Even in black and white, I do love the little things, such as Alan's rubbery texture here, and his mouth never being fully colored or shaded in. The song, while pretty depressing for a show that covers its sad and angry patches a little better, it gets the job done. Plus, their singing isn't bad. That last shot will always be one of my favorite shots done in Gumball. They end the faith on a happy note, so let's finish off the pizza. So now we get to the main part of the episode. Now that we established that Larry is being heavily mistreated, the family goes into an apocalyptic Elmore. I gotta say, it looks really well done. I love how the rubble never gets in the way, and the subtle placements of fires also act as light in a sense. We get to see both criminals stay criminals, but also the police force turn criminal. It's an underrated scene as the family are first relieved to see the police force trying to restore order, but
Larry also worked as the police force accountant. I haven't been paid, so gosh darn you all.
I feel like I've heard this reference somewhere, but I'm not sure. But anyway, the donut sheriff is just as corrupt as you saw, and then the episode sort of loses its focus for a short while. This happens a bit in certain episodes, but here it's super weird because Richard goes temporarily nuts trying to salvage whatever he can before Gumball points out Locust, and I know it's a reference, but I couldn't see a reason why Richard would want to shift his personality so drastically.
You'll thank me when you're sleeping in your comfy canoe.
Can't we just sleep on the mattress?
No way! That's our emergency raft in case the town floods.
Unless it's for a lame joke, I guess. Maybe. You're the boss. However, for something that's not lame and obvious.
Principal Brown? Principal Brown?
No, Darwin, that's an ambush!
I am no longer Principal Brown. I am the Eagle on the Road!
We get to see the children of the school dressed in apocalyptic riot gear. Insert Mad Max reference here. Now, while the age difference here isn't that dramatic, I did enjoy how Nicole threw Mr. Brown through a windshield. It just reminded me of something from Raw or those Def Jam video games. There's also just that charm of the survival instincts the family has, and I really enjoy that part. We then see Larry, and they apologize for their former behavior.
Society collapsed as soon as you resigned.
But that was only 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, and that's all the time it took for us to realize our mistake.
Like with the other episode, The Faith, this episode solidifies Larry. Even though he would get a much better representation of what it's like to be Larry later on, I love this scene. Larry was shown to work as the police force accountant, a repairman, and a pest control dude. Now you may be wondering, wait, wasn't a bug part of the pest control?
I command you to stop! Oh, creepers. I am so sorry, madam. How dare you? You shot me!
You can kind of see why he didn't keep his job for long. They do tip him, even though the economy has gone to crap. When put side by side next to Gumball's actions in The Faith, he isn't personally affected, as his relationship with Larry is akin to like the Robinsons, except Mr. Robinson is way more hostile to Gumball than Larry. But what I mean by this is that even though they aren't friends, they are at least aware of each other, and Larry is at least affected by Gumball being a nuisance. The episode ends with Larry getting an apocalyptic adjusted tip, and that was the pizza. If you were to put two doors in front of me and I had to choose which one's the better episode, because they're both really good, I'd say the pizza. It had a more clear-cut story with a logical progression for the most part, and we get to see a side of Larry that we didn't already, because it's more Alan episodes than Larry-based episodes. I like them both, but the pizza barely edges out a win because of its cohesiveness. Anyway, gotta get back on that Gumball grind, but in the meantime, if you want to see my other Gumball reviews, click here. And if you want to see more verses where I compare two cartoon episodes, click here. Special thanks to the patrons of June, and until next time, take care. Alpha out.